Good morning, and thank you so much for being here. We appreciate the media's presence this morning. My name's Desmond Cole. We're here today because racism kills. We're here today because anti-Black racism kills. And we're here in particular today because we know that anti-Black racism is a pervasive issue, not only in the Ontario Public Service, which we're here to talk about this morning, but across this province and across this country. Henrose Nelson and Jearie Dixon are two workers in the Ontario Public Service. They're here to share their story with you today. They have filed a $26 million lawsuit against the Ontario Public Service, against AMAPCO, a public sector union, and against ALCO, another public sector union representing provincial workers. Jearie and Hentrose are here to tell you why they're filing this $26 million discrimination lawsuit this morning, how the treatment of anti-Black racism within the public service and within public service unions has affected them, and how they're fighting back. So we will hear from each of them, and then we'll take a couple of questions. Thank you.
I want to use a few moments to express my gratitude and thanks to my family, my friends, and my community who have seen me through a difficult period in my life. I also would like to thank Jennifer Yang of the Toronto Star for giving me this opportunity to share my story with the public. I want to thank the news media also for being here and for giving us this opportunity to share our story with Ontarians. I'll take a few minutes to tell you about who I am, the experiences that I've had, and my immediate next steps. My name is Henrose Nelson. I am a wife and a mother. In 2004, I commenced employment with the Ontario Public Service. Since that time, the OPS has benefited from my unequivocal commitment of service. I have demonstrated ongoing commitment in working and providing support for the services that Ontarians receive. In exchange for that, I have been, for the past 7 years, been subjected to anti-Black racism, racial discrimination, among other things. I've had highly negative and traumatic experiences, too many to share with you in this moment. In October 2015, in October 2011, I was about 6. I gave birth to my third child, who was born extremely premature as a result of the harassment and the hostility that I experienced in the workplace. My son was born 1 pound, 6 ounces. When I was able to return to work in 2015, the onslaught from my employer continued. and I was forced to return to the same supervisor. After filing a human rights complaint, I experienced reprisal. And eventually, I was forced out of the workplace. The defendants in my civil suit has continually over the years, over the past 7 years, they have continued to fail me. Despite my ongoing efforts to address my lived experiences of anti-Black racism, racial discrimination, and racial harassment, the defendants' unlawful actions and wanton disregard for my dignity, my well-being, and my psychological health, and my safety in the workplace as a Black woman has caused me irreparable harm. I am here today because justice has eluded me despite my efforts for more than 7 years. I'm also here today by extension on behalf of all Black and racialized workers and all individuals who continue to experience anti-Black racism in the province of Ontario. I hear you. I hear your stories. And it pains me to hear those stories. I will end by saying that I'm using this chapter of my story, and I'm using this space today to highlight not just my story, but the story of so many others who have lost their voice, or of those individuals who are too fearful to speak out. I cannot get back the 7 years that has been taken away from my family and I. But I know one thing, I'm certain of one thing, and I want to be unequivocally clear that today I am reclaiming what has been stolen from me. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jearie Dixon. I am a single mother of one. I'm also senior Crown Counsel with the Ministry of the Attorney General. Like my colleague and my friend Henrose, I too have experienced insidious, painful, damaging experiences of anti-Black racism in the Ontario Public Service. I commenced working in the Ontario Public Service in 2002, and I went in with the idea that I would be able to work for an employer that valued humans, that valued dignity, that encouraged people to seek justice and to fight for justice. And immediately, my dreams were crushed. I immediately began to experience anti-Black racism in the workplace, racial harassment, racial discrimination, hostility, aggression, the idea that I was in a space that did not belong to me. It did not belong to Black people, Black women, racialized employees. I had a support person who was to assist me with putting my files together for court. I'm a litigation counsel, and this individual began telling malicious stories about me. When I went to OPS management seeking protection, seeking that they abide by human rights legislation and their own internal policies, I was met with anger, with derision. I was told that I should just ignore these acts. When I went to my union seeking protection, my union was told not to assist me. They were threatened. My experiences of anti-Black racism in the workplace has resulted in me working across 4 different ministries in the government. My last employment and my current job is with the Civil Remedies for Illicit Activities. I work with lawyers, that's very important to know. And in 2016, I learned that people were purposely, deliberately organizing to oppress me within the office, to marginalize me, and to harm me. This was very devastating, and it was more so because these were people that I had mentored. These were people who came to my office for support. These were people who I celebrated important moments in their life, whether it was the birth of a child, whether it was a promotion. These were people that I was compassionate towards. And this harm that was done to me was not only harmful to myself, but it was harmful to my family. They've had to watch me go through something that is just so debilitating, so painful. And it was also harmful to my colleagues. And one thing I think that is important to know is that when you speak out about any sort of racism, any sort of discrimination, any sort of harassment that is connected to your race, to your ethnicity in the Ontario Public Service, this is considered to be disrespectful, it's considered to be uncollaborative, and you will be punished for it. And so many of my colleagues, particularly lawyers, but this goes across the whole PS, are afraid to speak out about the toxic, poisoned work environment that we are expected to work in as employees, as counsel, as business professionals. Sorry, I'm just going to refer to my notes here. And this ordeal that I have gone through, like my colleague has indicated, has been very harmful to my personal and my professional well-being. As a result of what I've gone through, I now have a disability. And this is not, I think, an unusual story. And so we're happy that today we can give voice to it. And unfortunately, we have had to take in this route to bring a civil suit because other forums have not been helpful to our cause. And indeed, we've seen our unions actually participate in our oppression and our racial abuse, either by ignoring or trivializing our stories. One representative of my union, which is the Association of Law Officers of the Crown, so ALOC, told me that I was going to lose everything if I spoke out about racism. I would lose my job, I would lose my income, I would lose my home, and that a train was coming and it was going to hit me in the head and I couldn't see it coming. So these are the sort of things that we deal with. Another reason why we have brought this suit is we want to be able to see the public remedies for all of Ontarians and throughout Canada. We want to see that systems are put in place that actually work and actually substantively address the racial discrimination and oppression that we are experiencing in the Ontario Public Service. And when you think about the role of the Ontario Public Service and that it affects all Ontarians, whether you are a user, whether you're an employee, whether you're working in education and health, wherever it is, we have an impact. And if we have lawyers in the Ontario Public Service that are flagrant with regards to human rights and labor legislation, then you can imagine the effect of that on all citizens, because we are the people who write policies, we write regulations, we interpret them, we go to court on the behalf of citizens, and I think as Ontarians we should expect more of the Ontario Public Service and of our public unions who are supposed to be abiding by human rights and labor legislation. So in closing, I would like to thank my family who have been a great support to me, my friends, and my colleagues who, if it wasn't for them, I would not be here today. Racism really is something that it maims, it injures, it kills, and it is killing us in the Ontario Public Service, and something needs to be done to address this travesty. It really is damaging to our well-beings. Thank you.
I want to honor my friends' courage this morning in telling their stories. As was mentioned, a $26 million lawsuit has been filed at the Ontario Superior Court. As Jean Marie mentioned, that lawsuit includes public interest remedies to ensure that the courts can address this problem not just for Jean Marie and Hentrose, but across the entire Ontario Public Service, and provide any remedies beyond the money that's being asked for, to provide any other remedies that can end racism and discrimination inside the public service. Just give them a moment. Just give them a moment. So yes, thank you. As I was saying, a $26 million lawsuit has been filed here at the Ontario Superior Court. The lawyer for Hentrose and Jean Marie, Ranjan Agrawal, is here of Bennett Jones. This lawsuit is not only seeking compensation for Hentrose, Jean Marie, and their families, it is also seeking public interest remedies from the court to address systemic anti-Black racism within the Ontario Public Service. And we appreciate the media's attention and interest on this issue. If you have any questions, we can take those questions at this time. Haley, yeah.
Things like just being verbally accosted, like the last incident that happened before I was suspended from the workplace, and I was suspended because I raised my experience with anti-Black racism in the workplace. That was seen as reverse racism towards white people. So in April of 2016, I was working on a large file. I was sitting in the boardroom, occupying one space. We have two boardrooms where I work, and a woman came in and accosted me. She asked me, what am I doing? Am I setting up shop here as well? She went on to berate me, and it was so bad that a law practice student who was sitting in the second boardroom intervened on my behalf, and he said, "I can move." She was unhappy with his response. She was visibly angry, and she asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. So he moved, and she was able to use that boardroom. This same individual again accosted me. About a week later, when I was sitting in the boardroom, working away. A boardroom, it's not uncommon. I mean, we have people who come in off the street to sit in that boardroom to do work. We have people who are on contract who do work in there. It was not unusual to see files left in there, spread out along the whole table for weeks on end. Yet my being in this public boardroom, public in the sense that it's open to all CREA staff, was a problem. She continued to attack me. She then yanked out my plugs out of the outlet I was using, which caused my computer and monitor to go blank, and plugged in her own computer. When I took out her plug and plugged in my own computer, and she continued to berate me, she then went to get management, my legal director. They both returned, and as soon as he entered that room, he started to verbally attack me in front of her. She sat at the head of the table and said nothing. He went on and on. Eventually, he asked for her to leave, and he spoke with me in private. And what he told me is, you know, Jearie, I'm just trying to keep the peace. A third time, this woman comes again when I'm now set up in a smaller boardroom, boardroom B, working away on my own. And you have to understand, to get to the boardroom, you can't just happen there. You actually have to make an effort to get to the boardroom because it's at the other end of our offices. And again, she attacked me. She accused me, told me that she'd never been so disturbed in her life. She was there to torment me and to harass me. I later found out that people had complained about me just being in the boardroom. They complained about me having my coat rack in the storage room. This is a storage room that people had garbage stored in there. People had like old photocopying machines and junk, basically. Then I was told that I had more filing cabinets than other counsel, and this was unfair to them. I don't pick my filing cabinets. Obviously, the filing cabinets are assigned to us, and it's based on how many files you have. And as a matter of fact, I had generously given up my great cabinets to another counsel because they were closer to her office. So these are the sort of experiences. And when I went to management about it, it was trivialized. I had my legal director tell me when I tried to explain that, you know, as Black people and as Indigenous people, we experience racism more intensely than other racialized groups. He told me that Black people are hated all over the world. Like, there was no compassion, and he said these things to hurt me. So just along my career, I've experienced intentional, deliberate acts, and it has been exceedingly painful, exceedingly damaging, and just unbelievable, like just outrageous acts. So when I talk about these things, these assaults, these attacks, and when they're so unexpected and unwarranted, these are people who I was extremely generous to, kind to. I mean, these are people who would come into my office to use my mirror to get dressed, and come to me when they needed to vent about something in the office. They would bring their kids into the office for me to treat them and take them to different places and stuff like that. So I hope that answers some of your questions. Thank you. Okay.
You kind of answered my next question, where I was going to ask more details on specifics of racism and anti-Black behavior, and what makes this more so than, let's say, sexism, because
Yes, he is. And I should say during that meeting, he was leaned back in his chair and he had his feet on the table. So he did not consider this serious. He was laughing. And it was during this conversation that he told me that I was basically taking up too much space and there's not a place for me, basically, in the OPS.
And the woman that pulled the plug, she's also Caucasian?
She is as well, yes.
And so what were the steps for reporting? You went to your bosses. The violence and assault, was that ever reported to the police or any authorities?
No, when I say violence, I think people need to understand that anti-Black racism, when you're experiencing that is in itself a form of violence. When people are using and relying intentionally on negative anti-Black stereotypes and tropes to malign you, to mischaracterize you, and to lie about you in order for their own gain or for their own pleasure, that is a form of violence. And I think in society we often think of violence as like a battery, like when someone hits you. But these forms of discrimination and harassment and bullying are forms of violence, and there are studies that say it affects us the same way as if someone were to kick us or to punch us. And so that's what I'm saying when I say violent and I say assaults, right?
And so is there documentation of the reported, like moving down the line of you reporting your experiences and then being brushed aside and trivialized?
Absolutely. And I should also say that while I knew I was experiencing anti-Black racism from I joined the Civil Remedies Office in 2011, I just thought, well, racism is everywhere in the OPS. It's in our society. It wasn't until January 2016 that I learned that these acts were organized. Another colleague, a counsel who was new to the office, and he was on his second contract, and these were short-term, like 3-month contracts or so, told me, he pulled me aside and he let me know, and that he was encouraged by staff to participate in these acts of marginalization and discrimination against me, and that they told him that if he did not participate, he too would start to experience these same acts that were being committed against me. And in fact, in 2015, he went to both my legal director and my deputy director, unbeknownst to me, and told them about what was happening in the workplace, because it was also affecting him very negatively. And then he went back in 2016, and in 2016, when I learned that these were organized acts, and you have to understand that this is not just support staff, this is counsel, and there were two individuals. One was a white woman in admin staff, and one was a law clerk who was a Black woman, who were organizing on behalf of support staff and counsel these acts, these outrageous acts. And these are adults, so, and also legal professionals, and that makes it much more, I think, devastating and just reprehensible.
Can we let somebody else get in after that?
Sorry.
Yeah,
Yes.
No, it's okay. If anybody wants to answer, Henrose, if you wanted to go ahead as well.
Just to follow up on your earlier question or lawsuit details or claims. And I think I believe, or work experience of or commitment to the Ontario Public Service, there is no questioning our contribution. As Black women, we have had to work 10 times more to occupy the spaces that we were afforded. In terms of my personal experiences, I'll just highlight one. When I was subjected to a poisoned work environment, which resulted in my having my third child being born prematurely at 6 months. When I was well enough to return to the workplace, and I did in 2015, I went back and I had to try to find a way to fit in. I was displaced. There was no room for me. There was no more room. I was relegated to very degrading tasks, including going to a cage. I was sent an email that I should go to a cage. I was advised that this would be a pertinent and good project for me to return to the workplace. And at the same time, a Caucasian employee occupied my job. She occupied my job, and I was very intentional about documenting. And documented I did. And I asked questions. Why is this happening? I was met with resistance. I was met with hostility. And that white and Caucasian woman, she was eventually promoted 4 months after occupying my job. And I'll leave it there.
Other questions? Are you good? Yeah, you want to go on? Go ahead.
I'm sorry to keep it. So it went from the bosses and then to HR. Did HR do nothing as well?
So I'd say we have been very cooperative with our employer. We have entered into every process that exists within the Ontario Public Service. There are tons of policies, there are tons of procedures which we have adhered to in good faith. And this is the result of it. After several years, we have also engaged our unions. We have also engaged the Human Rights Tribunal. And after these number of years, this is the result.
Can I ask?
Sure.
Other than the end result being a possibility of monetary gain, what are the changes, real changes you want to see?
Perhaps I can answer that question. One of the things that we're looking for is a Truth and Conciliation Commission for Black and Indigenous and racialized employees in the Ontario Public Service. I think that is a real must because we are fearful right now to speak out about our experiences in terms of counsel. I can say that if you do speak out, you're going to end up with poor files. If you want to move into management, that's going to be prevented, or if you ultimately want to become a judge. Second of all, we're looking for funding for workplace discrimination and harassment prevention cases and human rights complaints, because right now if you were to bring a complaint before the Human Rights Tribunal or bring a civil action, we have to fund that. And that's another thing I should say, that fighting for our rights under human rights legislation, under the labor laws, has been extremely expensive, and we have had to fund that. We've had to refinance. I've had to refinance my home 3 times now, and that should never be. Meanwhile, our employer provides legal representation to managers and to our colleagues who have discriminated against us. That certainly is an unfair process, and it further marginalizes us, and I think the intent is to make us impecunious. Another thing that we're asking is for ongoing mandatory cultural competence and anti-Black racism training for all Crown employees, servants, agents, and representatives. And that would be Ontario-wide, and so this would be also for individuals who deal with the public. So we would see this within the health ministry, education, etc. I think that is imperative if we are actually going to address and really substantively change the culture of anti-Black racism in Ontario and within Canada.
Anything else?
And I just like to add to that to say, after you've fought this hard, after so many years, after so many hours invested, after losing time with your family, it ends here. It ends here. Like, there has to be an end point. And I would not wish, Jean and I would not wish for any other individual to have the experiences that we have had.
I think that's a good place to end. If you need more information, we have information. We've sent you all the statement of claim, and we're happy to follow up with you. Thank you again to all of the media for being here. We appreciate you.